Now, NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio with Lee Witting, whether you're listening on TalkZone, by podcast, through the archives of our ad-free shows on our YouTube channel, or connected through our Facebook page. From time to time, I like to read NDE and other STE reports written by experiencers and submitted to IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. When I was working on my seminary doctorate on how hospital chaplains can utilize reports of NDEs, the experiences in the IANDS collection proved to be an invaluable resource. And as listeners interested in learning more from NDEs about the other side, you might benefit from joining IANDS as well. The following are examples of monthly NDEs or other STEs provided as a service to members of IANDS. This selection was taken from accounts submitted by experiencers to IANDS and is provided here anonymously. In this account, a young woman abused by her boyfriend is diagnosed with stomach cancer. She finds herself out of her body, talking to her beloved grandparents, and learns that her fear, anxiety, and suppressing her emotions caused the cancer. She also knows her cancer will be cured if she returns to her body. She returns, but finds it difficult at first to live with her new sensitivities. In time, she is able to fulfill her purpose, to live with as much joy as she can, to expand the universe with her choices, and to play on the playground called Earth. She writes, "To fully understand my story, we have to go back to my childhood in the small town of Hanko in Finland. As long as I can remember, I was criticized about my body. This started my self-depreciation and doubt that I would ever be good enough to be loved by a man, much less be enough for anything else. I was simply the wrong shape and size to be considered for such a life. I truly believed that I wasn't worthy of love. When I was 16, I met my first boyfriend. He was nothing like the man I had dreamed about. He was quiet and stoic, had no interest in life, and drank way too much. But he was the only one who didn't push me away. This relationship turned into a 9-year nightmare. Not only did my boyfriend drink too much, he got very violent when he was drunk. My reality became one I had never imagined, and I would never wish on anyone. I was physically abused weekly, sometimes daily. I was very young, and I thought this was love. I thought the problem had to be with me. He never hit anybody else. In fact, he was often the one to diffuse situations in bars. As a result of all the stress and violence in my life, I developed stomach cancer at the age of 21. At the time, I could not understand how a healthy 21-year-old could possibly get stomach cancer. I'd done everything right. I exercised, ate healthy, and barely drank because my boyfriend needed a designated driver for his lush life. One cold winter night, my boyfriend came home from a night of heavy drinking, and I woke up to him sitting on my legs, punching my stomach with both of his fists. This was a habit of his. Punching someone in the stomach doesn't leave marks. On previous occasions, it was always easy for him to be apologetic and say that what he did wasn't so bad. Look at yourself. There's not a single mark on your body. I was so drunk I could barely walk. How could I possibly hurt you badly? You're throwing this way out of proportion. Besides, you know I don't mean it. I had learned to believe this was the truth. I also learned to take it like a champ, aka blame it on myself, and just wait for it to be over. But that particular night, things felt different. There was a darkness in his eyes I had not seen before. It felt evil. The last thing I remember is him strangling me and sticking his teeth into my left eyebrow as hard as he could. I have no idea how we got to the ER, but when I regained consciousness, I was standing by the back wall of the room, observing doctors and nurses feverishly working on someone. I noticed a heart monitor flatlining. When I realized that someone was my lifeless body, I felt a rush of panic. But as fast as that panic set in, it was lifted off me. I was emotionally pulled back from the scene. I felt indescribable peace and love. I knew everything was okay. I was okay. As I continued to watch the scene, I could hear everyone in the room and in the other rooms. I could see everything going on in the hospital and even outside. I had perfect 360-degree view of my surroundings. I felt more alive than I ever had. Everything was very much alive. I could feel how alive the trees were outside, even in the middle of Finnish winter when they were supposed to be frozen. As I observed things happening in the hospital, my grandparents approached me from behind. I've never felt such joy and love. I was so excited to see them, to hug them again. It is impossible to describe the elation I felt. They assured me that I was okay and that I could choose to either come with them or go back to my body. The body looked so small, I didn't see how I could ever fit into it. My current stage seemed so large and expansive. There was no way I could possibly fit back into that tiny body. As I continued to observe and chat with my grandparents, I could feel many others around me welcoming me and telling me how life is truly what we make it. I was showered with love and wisdom beyond what is possible in our human form. I finally understood that cancer in my stomach was caused by all the fear, anxiety, and stress I had tried to bury deep down while protecting my boyfriend from the possible embarrassment of his being labeled a woman beater. I also understood that if I decided to come back, the illness would be gone. I could see how we are all actors in this beautiful play called life, how every little thing fits perfectly into the intricately woven tapestry of the universe. There is no right or wrong, good or bad. There are only individual choices we make based on our understanding and the level of love we allow. We also make many choices before we come here, and we come with the knowledge that a lot of choices are not permanent. We can always choose differently. You know how many people wonder what the purpose of life is? I finally understood it. The purpose of life is joy. We are here to experience as much joy as we can, to expand the universe with our unique choices and views, and to play on this playground called Earth. I was approaching 20 minutes of being clinically dead, and my grandparents told me I needed to make my decision. I knew I wanted to come back. I hadn't lived yet. I had so much to accomplish, so much to see and do, and most importantly, feel. I felt sad to leave my grandparents and other wonderful people who joined me, but I knew they would always be with me, and I could call for their help anytime I needed. When I opened my eyes back in my body, I knew my cancer was gone. I knew my life would be completely different. I had a purpose now. I wanted to get off the hospital bed and run home that second. Of course, the doctors told me that I needed to stay in the hospital. All the correct protocol was to be followed, and even if my heart stopped for 20 minutes and it didn't kill me, the cancer was still a huge concern. They said it might be months before I go home. I knew better, though. Needless to say, the doctors were completely flabbergasted when they couldn't find any cancerous cells in my tests after 24 hours. I got to go home about a week later. The first year after my near-death experience wasn't very easy. I had moments of pure joy and elation, just like I felt on the other side, but they went by quickly because I still felt like my body was too small to hold on to such huge emotions. In fact, everything I felt was a giant ball of emotion. I hadn't relearned yet to control my energetic being here on Earth, and I felt every feeling around me, too. My neighbor bawling her eyes out because her boyfriend left her? Yeah, I felt it. The local grocer being mad at his busboy for dropping gallons of milk on the floor. Oh yes, the anger surged through me like nobody's business. The grass stretching in joy towards the sun? Felt it to my core. There were several days when I felt crazy, wanted to leave again, and wondered why I'd made such a stupid choice to come back. As I slowly regained control of my energy field again and protected myself from those around me, I realized what a fun and wonderful playground this place is. I have full control of how I show up, what I feel, and what I want my future to look like. I moved to the United States and went on to have a fantastic career as a makeup artist in the film industry. I am Oscar and Emmy nominated. I have 2 wonderful sons who are absolutely magical creatures. They are very different, but equally amazing. They bring so much joy not only to me, but also to everyone who comes in contact with them. Now, 30 years later, I still revel in this wonderful opportunity to be on this planet right now. I don't have all the answers, and I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I do know that how I show up affects the entire world around me. I've chosen to be a channel through which good flows for everyone. That is my purpose. And even though I was strongly discouraged from talking about my experience by the people closest to me when I first told them about it, I've now chosen to bring this to the attention of everyone. Life is too precious to waste on worrying. I want everyone to know that they are loved, protected, and supported at all times. It is never too late to share your story and make a difference. I've been the lighthouse, the safe haven for many for the past 3 decades without actually sharing my story. I can help people by simply being, but I finally understand that by sharing my story, I can help a lot more people. My words are not perfect yet, and I am learning how to share details without sounding crazy, but it's all coming together perfectly, in perfect time. Thank you.
The reluctance to talk about NDE experiences is perhaps best exemplified in this story from a wonderful lady named Rose Murphy, who had an NDE way back in 1951, yet felt embarrassed to share it until more than half a century later. Rose wrote, "The nurse got me into bed and left. I was giving birth with no one around. I felt myself going into a black void. I moved in this void into a tunnel. I suddenly felt myself spinning through the tunnel and saw a circle of light at the end. I was drawn to the light, hesitated a moment, and suddenly found myself in the light. The immediate feeling of peace and love emanating from the light cannot be expressed in words. I was surrounded by God's bright light. I knew I was with God. I felt His unconditional love and peace. I don't know how long I was there, but I know I didn't want to leave. I wanted never to leave this beautiful place. Then I heard a most beautiful, majestic, deep voice say very slowly, 'Now that you know what it is like, go back and tell the others.' Immediately I was back in my body. Saw my doctor at the foot of my bed scolding me for waiting so long to get to the hospital, and heard the nurse tell me I had a baby boy. I became very confused and wanted to tell her I was with God, but I didn't because she would have thought I was hallucinating or was crazy. I kept hearing God's voice and the words He spoke to me. I couldn't understand why this happened. I later realized that I had experienced a dry birth, which I learned is most difficult. My amniotic fluid had been seeping out for about 4 months before the baby was born, and forcing the baby through the birth canal without the help of the fluid, I stopped breathing from exhaustion. I don't know how long I was in the light, but what I saw and felt will never leave me as long as I live. I will never forget God's voice and the words spoken to me. Many years passed. I pondered over what had happened to me. Each time I closed my eyes and thought about what happened, I would get such peace from hearing God's beautiful voice and His words, but I was so afraid to say anything to anyone. In 1976, I read Dr. Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life. I became so excited. I didn't dream it. I'm not crazy. Others had the same experience I did. Excitedly, I read a passage from the book to Frank and said, "That's exactly what happened to me 25 years ago. I remember it as if it were yesterday." His nonchalant comment was, "Oh, you must have been dreaming." And I thought, that's why I never told anyone about it. No one would have believed me. But now I knew there were others out there that have had the same experience, and I felt so relieved. Dr. Moody coined the phrase NDE, near-death experience, because that is exactly what it is, experiencing death and coming back. The changes in my relationship to God, life, and death were tremendous. Physical, mental, and emotional phenomena surprised and sometimes frightened me. I tried to record some of these happenings, but some have eluded me. In this account, a person who drowned twice in childhood recounts two very different experiences which resulted in different after effects. After the moment of my death, I became like a breath and was breathed into the body of a nude, non-gender being. I was standing alone on a bare, sandy beach before a fairly still body of water, above which was an open blue sky. I was very confused and frightened. At the center of the horizon was a small patch of clouds, a patch which I realized was approaching me. As it approached, I saw that the clouds were actually beings, and as the beings crept closer, I saw that they were lions, 7 of them with enormous wings. When they were close, I viewed them in great detail. Their wingspans were wide enough that they seemed to envelop the entire horizon. Their paws were enormous, curled under a bit in relaxed fashion. Their faces, however, were human, with eyes fierce and kind and loving in a way I have never experienced on earth. I felt only comfort now, as if nothing could possibly harm me, and I experienced an overwhelming feeling of complete joy and contentment. This is the moment I was revived. I believe that, had I not been revived, I certainly would have been escorted away with these amazing creatures. I have since always been capable of envisioning this image in great detail, and it is beautiful to me. He continues, I was only a toddler, and when my mother realized I was unconscious, she called a family friend who was a registered nurse who talked my mother through my resuscitation. I received no medical attention afterwards, although I did suffer brain damage. Through my childhood, I experienced petit mal seizures, and my short-term memory was permanently damaged. And then he goes on. It was summer, and my older sister was having a few friends over for her 15th birthday party. We had an in-ground swimming pool with a slide, hemmed in with a privacy fence from the rest of our yard, which was quite large. My sister and her friends were leaving, and as they were shutting the gate, I said, "Hey, watch," and slid down the slide on my back, head first. As soon as I hit the water, the girls left, not knowing that I hit my head on the square plug at the bottom of the pool and split my head open. I was not knocked unconscious. I curled into a fetal position, inhaling water. The sun was shining, sparkling through the water, and I saw blood pooling in front of me in contrast with the blue pool. I do not recall feeling any real pain or extreme panic. I do not have a concept of time, but eventually I could see our house from an aerial view of about 80 feet. I saw the roof of our house, the entire yard, my sister at the gate on the other side of the yard, about 60 feet from the pool fence. I saw my mother mowing the yard around the apple trees, which was quite a distance from the house. I also saw myself curled up, a tiny figure on the bottom of the pool, with blood pooling around my head and neck. I was then shuttled through a tunnel of rainbow lights at a speed which cannot be described, for a period of time which I cannot estimate. I emerged at the entrance of a beautiful garden, at the center of which was a hall open with pillars, featuring calm blue sky with white clouds. There were small plants and rocks surrounding the first few pillars. Then the pillars extended into a mist. I felt a presence to my left, but there was no sound. To my right, a woman was sitting weeping on a stone, being counseled by someone wearing a simple white garment. Though no words were spoken, I heard their conversation intuitively. She was mourning her own death and was very worried about her daughter, whom she was leaving when she died. She had died of an incurable disease, however, and could not go back, and her counselor was comforting her, communicating that her daughter was grown and would be fine. I could feel this woman's heart breaking. I was not counseled directly and felt very calm. I knew that I was free to pass down the hall or return to life, that this was my choice, unlike the woman who was unwilling to accept her death. I very much wanted the relief of continuing down the path before me, but I could also envision my body in the pool, and by choosing to depart that life, I would be giving up a priceless experience, that no matter how great or small the accomplishments were in this life, or how difficult this life may seem, that the human experience is invaluable and precious, and that everyone's life is this way. I turned my back to the pillars and awoke in my body before I was found by my sister. Opened my eyes briefly, then passed into a deep darkness until my sister found me, pulled me from the pool, and resuscitated me. I was potentially dead for about 10 minutes, perhaps longer. The drive to the hospital was about 30 minutes as we were rural, and I came close to bleeding to death. The incision on the back of my head was closed with 15 stitches, and I contracted pneumonia. My short-term memory, which was damaged by my previous drowning, did not seem to be affected at all, at least as far as I can tell. My memory problems began from the earlier drowning and did not become worse following the second. I find this rather peculiar. However, on the way home from my week-long hospital stay, we passed a small house on a country road, very nondescript. Yet I immediately knew many things about this house, as I had lived in it and was aware of who lived in it. This was the first time I had ever experienced any form of psychic intuition, but I've learned not only to live with it, but to abide by it. I do, however, tend to keep it a secret from people. And that's what this show has been all about, how people are very strongly concerned when they've had an NDE or a similar mystical experience that people will mock them or ridicule them or tell them they were dreaming, tell them it was not, couldn't possibly be true. And no one likes to sound like a fool. And yet the power of a mystical experience is so great, it's so overwhelming, that in your heart you know it was not dreamed, it was not imagined, it was not the effect of a drug or hallucination, anesthesia, or any of those things. And the confirmations come later in the fact that an out-of-body experience probably leads to your knowing what was going on in the room when you were dead on the operating table. People drift through the walls and hear conversations of their loved ones, see their family weeping because they think perhaps the patient has died. Some people even hear the thoughts of other patients in the hospital and can travel from room to room or look down from above the whole hospital and observe things that they couldn't possibly know in any other way.
Well, thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear this show again or any of our more than 500 archived ad-free NDE interviews, go to TalkZone's NDE Radio site and hit the Past Shows button, or go to our YouTube channel, NDE Radio with Lee Witting, where you can subscribe to and comment on the complete NDE Radio library. And listen next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern at TalkZone for more NDE Radio. I'm your host, Lee Witting, saying, once again, thanks for listening.